Good afternoon, everyone, and happy Father's Day to everybody out there. Welcome to our Sunday edition of Spilling Tea. I am your host, Tiffany Daniels. Now, before we get started, the few usual things. First of all, the document we will be reading today is going to be included as a link in the description, as well as the video that kicked off all these other videos about the JRC and the petition to shut down the Judge Rotenberg Center. If you haven't already signed the petition, please go ahead and do so. Now, just as a warning, whenever we discuss the JRC, we are either A, depicting, or B, discussing in vivid detail the torture of disabled people. So if you have young children in the room while you are watching these videos, please put on your headphones. So, you figured it with those headings, folks. We are talking about the JRC today. And what I got for you is a comment from Gregory Miller, which is a public submission he made back on posted back on March the 2nd, 2016. This is during the time of the FDA hearings to ban the skin shock devices from the Judge Rotenberg Center. Basically, they welcomed all public comments, whether through emails or through actual public testimony before the panel. And Gregory Miller, you saw him in that first video of mine. He is a former employee of the JRC and has been one of the biggest key points in our fight against the center. So, he gave us that inside look that we would have never gotten otherwise before those videos started coming out back in 2012. So, without further ado, we're going to go ahead and read through his comment. We're going to talk about it. I can tell you right after this what you should expect to see from me this week. And we'll get you back to your day here. So, subject: aversive shock, JRC GED devices, evidence of mislabeling, adverse events unreported, risks, misuse, and deception. Gregory Miller starts with, Dear Dr. Boucher, please see my attached letter. I am addressing my letter to you because of your important and central role in the presentations to the FDA panel on April the 24th, 2014, at which I testified. My letter has grown into the size of a report, and each page is packed with essential, concrete, and factual evidence and quotations to consider while determining whether to ban the GEDs. The content within exposes the deception and the potential mislabeling of aversive GED devices, unreported adverse events and risks, and JRC policies that demonstrate the misuse of the GED aversive devices. As a former employee of the Judge Rotenberg Center for over 3 years, the following information is true and accurate to the best of my knowledge. I initially sat down to write you a quick letter about the potential mislabeling of the GED, GED-1, and the GED-3A devices. JRC apparently concealed the JRC's GED-1 is actually the GED-3A device, which is not FDA cleared, and that the GED-1 user's guide must have actually been written for the GED-3A. But then I added a second section to this letter to cover risks and adverse events that include specific medical diagnosis that should have been reported as adverse events on the MAUDE database elsewhere, including burns and early signs of liver organ failure. Oh, wow. As for the emotional risks, please see the words of JRC's Dr. Matthew Israel, where he reports that students were shocked for collateral, temporary emotional behaviors in anticipation of getting shocked, and for the natural stress responses of tensing the muscles during GED shocks. That also demonstrates that students do indeed suffer from extreme anxiety. Exactly. Thank you. It's medically documented. If you use electric shock on a person, there's going to be muscle tense-ups. Come on. How do these idiots have medical degrees? Moving on. Please see evidence that the type of treatment that was given to Andre McCollins, who we can see tied up and shocked repeatedly for tensing his muscles and yelling and screaming for help, was ongoing routine policy for years and not a very rare instance. Thank you! Then I added Section 3 called 510K Cleared Devices for the Treatment of SIB. Remember that self-injurious behavior acronym, specifically indicated to be used only in patients where other forms of therapy have been attempted and failed. In Section 3, I share JRC's no meds policy, saying that students will be rejected or expelled from JRC if their parents wish for their child to be on psychiatric medication. I quote the JRC's former executive director, Dr. Israel, as saying that there is a clear difference between positive behavior support and behavioral psychology, and that Israel actually lists categories of behaviors for which students were shocked as consequences for non-aggressive, non-destructive, or non-self-injurious behavior, also in Section 3 of this letter. As someone who worked at JRC and knows the truth, I have a need to share the truth and also back it up with valid and verifiable references and actual photographs so that it is not just my word against the JRC's claims. Please see the verifiable evidence that the GED 3A was in use 12 years ago, and see a photograph that intentionally concealed the 3A label on what the JRC calls their GED 1 device. So, see guys, you remember in that one vid clip I showed you where they tried to sound it off as he's just a disgruntled employee? To combat that, he attaches to his claims actual photographs and documented evidence. He is not just a disgruntled employee that can be written off, believe me. The most important reason why the clarification matters between the GED, GED 1, GED 3A, and the GED 4 is that the GED 1 device that was presented as a FDA cleared device, which is actually the GED 3A device that is not FDA cleared, is in fact the very same instrument that severely harmed Andre McCollins. Oh, wow. For more examples of adverse events caused by the GED, please read my testimony of the GED-induced seizures. Besides burns and early liver organ failure transminence, medical diagnosis of acute stress response, unresponsiveness, catatonia, and PTSD were not reported on the MAUDE database or to you in the FDA panel on April the 24th. Please see the large photographs of burns where I count up visible GED burns and compare the number of shocks to get a percentage of GED burns to GED shocks. Please see my clarification of the difference, the circular electrodes that cause much less damage than the spread electrodes, which accounts for testimonies of minor skin irritation, arrhythmia, and that the GED feels like a bee sting or a hard pinch. Please read my testimony about one of my students who quit eating when she was put on the GED to the point that she had to have a feeding tube sewn into her stomach, and about one of my students who died. Please read direct quotes of JRC policy that states that students will be rejected from JRC if parents of students want their children to take psychiatric medications, even if the parents believe that the medication has helped their child in the past. The policy shows that the GEDs were not used as only a last resort. Sincerely, Gregory Miller. So this is actually quite a bombshell that he dropped back in 2016, folks. We all read through that massive FDA document over the last many videos and what the JRC was claiming. Gregory Miller here in this letter to that same FDA panel basically blows the lid off of exactly the kind of image the JRC was trying to present during the panel, which even then they weren't even buying based off the merit of their own words. What he is saying here is what they are reporting is not true. They're not telling you all the adverse effects of their device at all. What Greg Miller is telling you here is that there was burns, early liver organ failure, which is a huge deal, folks, acute stress response, unresponsiveness, catatonia, PTSD. There's a lot more going on than just psychological, a lot more than what we thought. So, basically, it puts the lie that there is to this idea that there is no long-term effects caused by the skin shocks. Obviously, that is not true. Also, when it was talking about what these shocks felt like, apparently what the GED was listing had nothing to do with the circular electrodes that they use. They were talking about the more wider spread electrodes that we're more likely to see in hospitals from about around the 30s and the 20s. We're talking about a more concentrated, targeted shock with those, where it is pinpointing all that pressure, all that intensity and pain on a single spot in the human body. With several of these electrodes, those spots are pinpointed and all those energies go directly in. Of course, that is going to make the pain a lot more than if it was spread out over a certain area of the body. So, Gregory Miller basically says, okay, they call me a disgruntled employee. Here's my proof. Here's my documented evidence. Here's the pictures. Here's the records to back it up. Now what? Right? So, we'll definitely be getting into more of this. I pulled up for tomorrow, and this is probably going to be at least a few days of videos. The countersuit on the ban. See, the ban was actually passed on 2018, but was not scheduled to be enforced until March 2020 of last year. We're going over their countersuit, which they started in 2019, and of course the appeal for the ban. So we're going to be reading over that, and yeah, I'm sure I'm going to get triggered, but hey, maybe that anger will help me. Like, I don't even know. We all know I'm going to rant. Who am I trying to kid? But anyways, that's all we got for this afternoon, folks. Now, you know the drill. We don't get very many views on this channel. The few that we do get do tend to get removed from time to time. So please don't forget to hit the like button, hit subscribe, and don't forget to hit the comments. I do appreciate your time this afternoon. And as always, folks, we here at Spilling Tea hope you have a good one. Bye-bye.